I think that any good investment idea probably can be put in one paragraph. I mean, now, there are all kinds of investment ideas that I'm not going to be able to understand. I believe very strongly, as does Mrs. B, as Rose Bumpkin is called, I believe very strongly in operating with what I call my circle of competence. And the most important thing in terms of your circle of competence is not how large the area of it is, it's how well you've defined the perimeter. If you know where the edges are, you're way better off than somebody that's got one that's 5 times as large, but they get very fuzzy about the edge, around the edges. And I can understand some kinds of simple businesses. I can't understand complicated businesses. Coca-Cola, what is it, about 110 years old now, and selling 750 million 8-ounce servings of their products a day around the world. Per capita consumption going up in virtually every country in the world after that 110 years or so, and it has 47% of the soft drink consumption throughout the world outside the United States, 41% of the United States, and gaining share every year. It isn't very complicated. I mean, you have to decide, A, whether it's a product that is somewhat durable, which I think illustrated, and whether the appeal is universal, which it certainly is, and then whether you have honest and competent management running it, which you most certainly do. Peter Lynch has always said, buy a business that's so good that any idiot can run it, because sooner or later one will. We would like to buy a business like that, and then we'd like a terrific guy running it. And we had 2 terrific people at Coke running it. All we're trying to do is try and find businesses we think we can understand, where we like the people running them, and where the price makes sense in relation to the future economics. And when I find that, I like to buy a lot of it and keep it. And they're hard enough to find that I don't believe in selling them very often, because it's hard to find replacements. I would, instead of calling them role models, I call them heroes, actually. And I think if you tell me who your heroes are, I can tell you how you're going to turn out to quite an extent by this point in life. And I have been extraordinarily lucky in that none of my heroes ever let me down. I mean, the ones I came up with throughout their lives, I've never felt that I've been let down in any way with it. Number 1 was my dad, and had a huge impression on me. My wife, who is here, is one of my heroes. I mean, she is, in terms of she's taught me a tremendous amount, and never seen anybody any better with human beings than she is. And you can, Yogi Berra again said you can observe a lot just by watching. And I watched my dad, and I've watched her, and I had a professor, Ben Graham, back at Columbia, and had a huge impact on me. So I have been lucky in that I've had terrific heroes, and they haven't let me down. And that takes you a long, long way. I've gone through 1 or 2 periods where we're kind of tough in life, but not. I mean, everybody's had that, but having the right heroes will take you right through it. I picked up a book when I was 19. I got interested in stocks when I was about 6 or 7, and I bought my first stock when I was 11, but I was playing around with all this stuff. And I had charts and volume, and I'm making all kinds of technical calculations and everything. And then I picked up a little book, and it just said that you're not buying some little ticker symbol that bounces around every day. You're buying a part of the business. And as soon as I started thinking about it that way, everything else followed. Very simple. So we buy businesses we think we can understand. There's no one here that can't understand the Coca-Cola company. I would say there's no one here that can understand some new internet company. And I said at the annual meeting this year that if I were teaching a class in business school, on the final exam, I would pass out the information on an internet company and ask each student to value it. And anybody that gave me an answer, I'd flunk. I don't know how to do it.
Well, it's very important to recognize mistakes. I mean, if somebody goes around and says, I never made a mistake, I mean, you quit listening to them. I mean, they're in a dream world. So facing up to it it's a little like in terms of discussing issues. You should be able to discuss the other fellow's position just as well as you can discuss your own. So I mean, that's part of thinking well, and certainly part of making good decisions in business is recognizing the poor decisions you've made and why they were poor, and that doesn't mean you never do the same thing. I mean, because sometimes it was a freak situation, but I have made lots of mistakes. I'm going to make more mistakes, but you know, Babe Ruth struck out a lot of times. I mean, it's the name of the game that you do it. You don't want to expect perfection in yourself. You want to strive to do your best, but it's too demanding to expect perfection in yourself, and it does some good to recognize them and not start trying to go around kidding people about them.
I only believe in working with people I like. I mean, and we have a very small office. We have maybe 10 or 11 people there, but I think it's crazy to take a job or work with people that cause your stomach to churn and keep you up at night and all of that. And if you're in a job like that, think about changing it. I said that working with people you don't like in business is really like marrying for money, which is probably a bad idea under any circumstances, but it's crazy if you're already rich, right? So I work with people I like. I mean, I tap dance every day to work, and I'm with people that I think they're terrific. I admire them. I gave a talk to some student at Harvard asked me to talk last year. He said, who should I go to work for? I said, well, go to work for whomever you admire the most. And got a call from the dean about 2 weeks later. He said, what'd you tell these kids? He said, they're all becoming self-employed. What we really want to do is buy businesses that we would be happy to own forever. It's the same way I feel about people who buy Berkshire. I want people to buy Berkshire that plan to hold it forever. They may not for one reason or another, but I want them at the time they buy it to think they are buying a business that they're going to own forever. And I don't say that's the only way to buy things. It's just that's the group I want to have join me, because I don't want to have a changing group all the time. I measure Berkshire by how little activity there is in it. If I had a church and I was the preacher and half the congregation left every Sunday, I wouldn't say, oh, this is marvelous because I have all this liquidity among my members, There's terrific turnover, I would rather get a church where all the seats are filled, every Sunday by the same people. Well, that's the way we look at the businesses we buy. We want to buy something that we're really happy to own virtually forever, and we can't find a lot of those. And back when I started, I had way more ideas than money, so I was just constantly having to sell what I thought was the least attractive stock in order to buy something that I just discovered that looked even cheaper. But that's not our problem really now. And so we hope we're buying businesses that we're just as happy with 5 years from now as now. And if we ever found some huge acquisition, then we'd have to sell something, maybe to make that acquisition. But that would be a very pleasant problem to have. We never buy something with a price target in mind. I mean, we never buy something at 30, saying if it goes to 40, we'll sell it, or 50, or 60, or 100. We just don't do it that way any more than when we buy a private business like See's Candy for $25 million. We don't say to ourselves, if we ever got an offer of $50 million for this business, we'd sell it. That's just not the way to look at a business. The way to look at a business is this going to keep producing more and more and more money over time? And if the answer to that is yes, you don't need to ask any more questions. Buying businesses on Wall Street is so easy. You can buy one at 10 o'clock and sell it at 10:05, and you can become a part owner of General Electric at 10:10. That the very ease with which that can be done causes people to do a lot of things that don't make a lot of sense. But most of the fortunes have been made in relatively few securities, and ones that were held for a very long time, and ones that the buyer understood.